Welcome to Focused on Forward. The purpose of this podcast is to focus on recovery from life situations, be it a disease, chronic or acute, perhaps the loss of someone so dear to you in death, or a change of life patterns that has affected you so profoundly that you have no choice but to find your new normal and become focused on moving forward. Each episode is designed to show the positivity that people bring to each and every one of their stories, the successes they've had, ways that they have become so definitively focused on moving forward. We look forward to sharing their stories, and we hope that they inspire you just as much as they have inspired us. Thanks for listening, and enjoy the show. Good afternoon, and welcome to Focused on Forward. Today, I have the pleasure of introducing you to Tracy Lowry. Now, perhaps you've already been listening to Tracy on her podcast called the Multiform PTSD Show. And if you haven't had a chance to listen to it, I strongly recommend that you do. I was recently a guest on her show and had the pleasure of talking with Tracy and getting to know her a little bit. And so as much fun as I had talking with her on her show, I'm equally as thrilled to have her here on my show where we can talk a little bit about her backstory. You guys get to know her. And then we're going to talk about why you need to go listen to her show and why that's so important as well, the work that she's doing over there. So Tracy, thank you so much for being a guest today here on Focused on Forward.
Oh, goodness. No, the pleasure is all mine. And I, too, had a great time when you were on our show, and I'm excited for that to air, but very honored and thankful to be here as well. Thank you very much.
Oh, excellent. Excellent. My pleasure. So I tell you what, Tracy, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn the microphone over to you. I'll let you tell your story of overcoming what you went through in your life and how you got to the point of being a podcaster. And then we'll kind of talk about your show a little bit after that. Okay.
Okay.
I'll jump in and interrupt you every now and then with a question. So
please do. Please do. In fact, I probably do better that way than just rambling on. So, I don't know that I grew up any differently than most, as far as I remembered. I just want to preface, I have a great family. I've got great parents and all of those things. But, a few years back, I was hiding from my trauma. Honestly, I was okay. I'm fine. I'm great. I'm strong. And so many things had happened to me that I really didn't think it was any different than maybe normal. And so I just tried to push it over. And finally, I guess to be frank, I had a mental breakdown and really wasn't sure I wanted to try anymore or pick myself back up because I was done. I'm kind of an all or nothing person. I used to be. I've worked on that sense, but before, I was go hard or go home. That was very much me. And so
fair enough.
I went really, really hard, and then I really, really stopped for a while. And I started off with a whole lot of victimization on my part. And it was, why did I have to go through this? Why did I have to go through that? Why? And, I guess to give maybe just a hint, I had been in very abusive relationships,
okay.
Physical, mental,
Sure.
Emotional, sexual, physical, you name it. It was there in multiple relationships. Sadly, I didn't learn the first time around. So it just really wore on me, and it was tough. I also had to deal with a major car accident, which left me with some brain injury issues and a series of concussions that made things not any easier. I was raped when I was younger. I was molested when I was just a wee baby, not baby, I guess, toddler, and didn't remember it until just a few years ago. While I was doing my healing, I started getting these flashbacks, and I was like, wait a minute. And I was putting it together with real life things, and it was real. And woo, I was already working through the traumas that I did know and remember.
Sure.
So then to throw that on top, I was like, what the heaven's sakes?
Yeah, that had to be quite the inrush, I would imagine.
It was. I call it like a bushwhack. It just like boosh. Because I was already working on some pretty tough things. Um, so in that, that's kind of when I just looked up and was like, really? And I just kind of looked at the heavens, and I'm a woman of faith, and I just was like, why is this happening to me? Why me? Why did I have to go through all this? I know people who haven't had to deal with one of these things, let alone all of these things, and people in my life, and blah blah blah. But I wasn't blah 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 at the time. It
Sure.
was pretty friend of mine, and my best friend, for a really long time, since we were very young, she was dying of cancer, and I went back to Michigan to visit her a few times, and she was my near and dear friend, and she knew my story up to that point. And she said, Tracy, we need to write a book. And I said, about what? And she said, your life. And I said, oh, that would be so fun. And I kind of laughed about it. And I was like, no one would believe me, because I hid it all very well at the time.
Sure.
At least I thought. I was like, no one would believe me. Everyone thinks my life was pretty gravy, and it wasn't. No one would believe me. And she's like, I don't care. So we planned it out. We wrote this book, and I wrote my story, and I did it in a very therapeutic way. I told it the way I saw it, the way it was, and how I remembered it. And I named names, knowing that her job was going to be to kind of clean it up. And she was gonna, change the names for me and make it so I still had family and friends when I was done with this book, that I didn't want to hurt people, but it was my therapy. And we thought maybe we could, help people out in the meantime. And
So you were
then
standing
she passed.
you were standing at the bridge with the gasoline, and she was taking the gasoline out of your hands, basically.
Well, no, I had the gasoline. I threw it on the fire, and then she had the extinguisher to take the fire out.
Okay. That's a fair analogy. Okay. So
Yeah,
really
yeah.
a writer and editor relationship is what we have here between the two of you at this point.
Yes. And
Okay.
she was very well read, and she knew my story. So it was a great mix, and it was a really great thing for us to do and work together. And then she passed, and no one could get in her computer, and the story, long story short, was gone. And I was then grieving the loss of my best friend, and I was engaged at the time, and he called it off the day of the wedding, like hours before.
Oh,
And so
wow.
I was just in this spiral, and I was like, you know what, forget it. I'm not doing this story. It's not meant to be done. And I kind of went into a dark place. Fast forward. Yeah, it was rough. Because I basically lost my two best friends within, I'm not sure, it was a month apart. It was pretty rough.
Yeah, that's a lot to take in on
And
top of everything else you're already dealing with. Yeah.
I lost a job and started a new one. I mean, all within like a 4 to 6 week period. It was like boom, 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 boom. And I was just like, okay,
Oh,
I'm done.
wow.
I give. Yeah. And that's really when the darkness really kind of took over. I couldn't do it alone anymore. So, in fast forwarding, I had my breakdown. It was a really hard road, and I had to switch my mentality from being the victim and why me? Why did this happen? I decided that's not what my friend, her name was Carrie. That's not what Carrie would want me to do. She was the sweetest, best person, literally, I knew in the whole world. And I knew that's not how she would want our legacy and her legacy to be
Right.
left. And so I decided, okay, I have to continue this. So I sat down and I started writing this book again, and I illustrated it. And there was another version that came to be. I was going to say out. It didn't come out. No one's going to read that version either. But it was better. And I actually found out I could draw. I'm not great. No one else is going to buy my pictures by any stretch, but I could get a point across.
Right.
So I illustrated the book, and that was part of my therapy. And then that version was born. It has now grown into a workbook to actually help people convert their traumas to their triumph and to overcome their trials and things like that. So I think she's probably a whole lot more prouder of what it became than how it started. But
I'm sure. Absolutely. Okay. So you went through the point of having the breakdown and having the realization that you had to do something with yourself, that, there was a
Mhm.
transition there that had to happen. How did that actualization happen for you? What was the point where you said, okay, Tracy, I have to be better for me?
Um, it I say I would love to say it was this one thing, one day it just clicked and everything just changed and I was a completely different person. And this is what I did. I wish I could say that. It was a process.
Okay.
I at first, like I said, I wasn't sure I wanted to go on. I was very close to suicidal. Um, and so at first it wasn't for me. It was for my son. I was like, he deserves better than this. I need to be here for him. And he was very little and that this is not okay. And so for him, then I was like, I got to get myself at least pulled together enough that I can be a good mom
Hmm.
and things like that. So it started off that way. And then it kind of grew and developed. And I had some good therapists and professionals, and I had some bad ones. So, if anyone out there is considering or has been suggested to them to see a counselor or professional, and you hear people that'll say, "Oh, don't, they're just a waste of time. Their mine was terrible, not worth my time." Let me tell you, my first one was horrible, was not worth the time, and I never went back to that specific person because I could tell right off there were going to be more harm than good. So,
Okay.
unfortunately, it's worth saying that you may have to look a little bit. First one did not pan out. I mean, he literally didn't even hear my story yet and said that he had worked with POWs and there was nothing I could tell him that was going to be worse than anything he's already heard. So I needed to suck it up and that I was being a coward.
Which is a great message from a counselor, by the way.
Yeah, yeah. And this was, by the way, the first, I mean, the only thing he knew was that I had just been in a really bad place. So anywho, I was like, yep, this isn't going to work. And then, I found a couple others and then I finally ended up with the people in my team I call my angels that help me now. And it took a little bit and it took a little bit. I was highly medicated for a while. I am very low medicated now. I'm very proud to say, but it's a process. It
Yes, it is.
was, it was a process of the right people, the right formula. I really dove into, I've always been kind of into the self-help world. I'm a nurse. I started as a massage therapist, so that was kind of my thing
Hmm.
anyway. Was helping and helping myself and helping others, but I dove in even further because I was like, this healing needs to happen and it needs to happen now. And so, I started um, doing things like yoga and meditation. And so I already said, I wrote books and I drew. I just did anything I could to just keep, I call it leveling up.
Hmm.
At whatever point I was at, my goal was just one step up. Because if you think about, if you are at the bottom of the barrel and you're in the darkest place, to expect a flip overnight to then have an exciting life and be so happy, you're going to set yourself up for failure. You have to
Right.
realize that it's a process and you just need to level up one step at a time and still realizing you're going to have bad days. And that doesn't mean that you're crazy. It doesn't mean that you're a bad
No,
person.
no,
It means you're human.
exactly. And,
Everyone
and
has those.
and that's the thing. I think many times we get lost in the fact that, okay, so I've taken this step, I've gone and seen the counselor, I went and got the medicine, I'm having a bad day, and people, I think, sometimes unfortunately assume that that's a failure on their behalf, instead of realizing that you
Yes.
are going to have a bad day and you need to allow yourself to have a bad day. And kind of the process that we
Mm-hmm.
do around our house is that, okay, so you're having a bad day, have the bad day, that's okay, but tomorrow morning when you wake
Yes.
up, it's time to start fresh, it's time to start new, and it's time to, dig in and channel positivity. And so we try
Yes.
to make sure that we don't have two bad days in a row. Sometimes that's out of your
Mm-hmm.
control, even then, whether you're going to have a good
Right.
day consecutively or not, but you have to acknowledge that it's going to happen and you have to allow for it to happen as well.
Yes. Yes. What I like to say is, you know what? If you're angry, if you're sad, if you're depressed, feel them. It's okay to be angry and sad and depressed and all of those things. It's
Absolutely.
okay. You're human. Just don't unpack and stay there.
That's right. I like that. Oh, I like that. Don't, don't just go ahead and keep talking. I'm just writing that down. Don't unpack.
Not a problem. Not a problem. So, it was kind of a process, and I had a lot of support from loved ones in my circle, family, friends, um, things like that. So it kind of took a village, but yet it kind of really came from, I had to pull it out of myself. Um, because I'm also a huge believer in surrounding ourselves with people who are going to be our tribe, who are going to be supportive and helpful, and know when you need kind of the kick in the butt and when you need just a little bit of love and support. That being said, I think we need to try and not depend on that.
Right.
Because what happens if, that person was my friend Carrie, and she passed away. So that really, not only was I grieving the loss of my friend, I was like, okay, now who's my person who, I lost kind of that person that helped keep me on track. And that's my bad, because I didn't do it well enough for myself. I depended too much on outside sources. So it takes a village, but you also need to be able to be self-reliant in your own happiness and your own mental health, for sure.
Oh, I agree. You use that phrase, "It takes a village." I think it's interesting that sometimes we use these sayings that are kind of commonplace, like "it takes a village," because it. But the reason why those sayings are said is that there's accuracy to them. It does take a village. It does take more than one person to kind of help us through our trials and tribulations. Yes, we have to do the work, but it's okay to have a reliance on someone else to kind of help lean on when we're weak, when we aren't as strong as we could or should be. And I think it's important for us to recognize that. And the other saying that I like that's kind of akin to that is Rome wasn't built in a day. You can't expect things to be better the next day because I did this today, so tomorrow has to be better. Tomorrow has to be awesome.
Yeah.
Because that's not life. That's just not how life works. Right. Okay. So out of your therapy, I took a couple lessons from my therapist, a couple of things that she recommended to me that I use on a daily basis that helped me to continue to be focused on forward. What was a lesson that you learned from your therapist that you use on a regular basis?
Oh, goodness. There was a lot. One of them was I have a picture, but for my book, I actually just did it last night, where there's steps and there's different emotions on the steps. And, the bottom is grief and guilt and shame. And at the top is, enlightenment and love. And there's everything in between there. And it was basically just focus on getting to the next step. Again, going back to, you can't just do it overnight and get to the top of the stairs from the bottom of the stairs. It's just not practical to expect that. What else? I think one of the most helpful things she did was help me, and I'm sure it's different for everyone, but help me find the things that did that quicker for me, that can get me out of the funk quicker, that can be a quick vibration energy picker-upper, for lack of a better term. And no, I'm not talking about drugs, and I'm not talking about alcohol or anything like that. That is not encouraged to help for those things. But for me, just going for a walk outside with barefoot, obviously when it's not snow on the ground, but just being outside and getting some fresh air, 15 minutes, and it can really uplift my mood. What music I listen to. I now have a playlist on Spotify that is what I call it, level up, because if I just need kind of a pick me up, I need something to get me out of a funk. I'll turn that on, put it on shuffle, listen to a couple songs, and instantly I'm up a couple steps on those emotional ladders.
I have one I call the chair dancing playlist.
Chair dancing playlist. I love it.
Well, because I spend a lot of time in my life here. I call it glued to a chair. because I'm either designing a logo for somebody, I'm doing something online, or I'm sitting here talking to awesome people like yourself. And each one of these things requires a chair. So, and it's a running joke from when I was a kid. I could dance as long as I wasn't standing. If I was sitting down, I had rhythm, I could move. I tried to engage my legs, and it just, I had multiple left feet, so it wasn't a good thing. So I just call it the chair dancing playlist. But it's all upbeat. It's all upbeat, encouraging songs, and something that you can bob your head and your shoulders to as you're kind of sitting here doing your work, kind of get your jam on.
Yes. I also drive to it sometimes if I'm like starting to like nod off. Drive to it, and it just wakes me up.
There you go. So, excellent.
Yeah.
Cool.
So it just really depends on, I don't think it's the same for everyone, but just finding those couple things that you can do quickly, no matter where you are, whatever situation you're in, that you can just turn on your phone, put on your headphones, listen to a song, boom, it's done. Go out for a walk on your lunch break. Just whatever it is, make sure it's quick and easy and accessible, just to help start that process of lifting up.
Excellent.
I think those were probably some of the most helpful.
Okay. All right. So we've talked about your traumas, the things that you went through. We've talked about how you went through counseling and how you got to that point. Now let's talk about how you got to the point of deciding that, you know what, I need to sit in front of a microphone and talk to other people. How did that decision come about? We'll be right back after a word from our sponsors. And now back to Focused on Forward. And how big was the bet that you lost?
I lost big. No. I actually, technology and the internet and social media is a great thing. I got a friend that was in the podcasting business, and he was kind of watching me on my journey on social media. And he was like, you know what? You sound like you have an interesting story. I have a podcast. Would you be on it? I was like, yeah, sure. Like, I was not in as good of a place as I was now, but I was doing better. And I was like, yeah, sure. And that went really well. And then about a year later, he said, hey, I'm doing kind of a reunion, few episodes, kind of a where are they now thing. Will you come back and give us an update on how you're doing? And so I did, and that went really well. And then he turned off the recording thing, and he basically said, you need to do this. And I was like, do what? Like, what? And he goes, you should do this. You should do podcasting. And I was like, what? Had never considered it. Hadn't even thought about it. And I was like, why would anyone listen to me? Like, I'm just a regular person, And he was like, that's exactly why people would listen, because you're like everyone else. As far as relatable, not this big celebrity trying to sell books or things like that.
Right. You're not trying to sell them something. You're just trying to share the stories.
Right. Exactly. And so I was like, I guess. He's like, it's very therapeutic. And so I was like, oh, I'll think about it. And then a couple weeks later, he kind of shot me some information of like places that, platforms for podcasters and how to start 101, and just kind of started sending these things to me. And finally I was like, okay, I'll try a couple. We'll see how it goes. And the rest is history. I'm working on season 2, which because you were you're on my show now. Yay. Too, and I'm so excited. So yeah, that it really was no shocker to anyone else more than me that I got into this world.
Okay. So other than me, who was your favorite guest? See what I did there?
Oh, couldn't help myself. Yes. No, give yourself that plug. Absolutely. Oh man, that's hard.
See, somebody asked me that question before, and I thought it was a highly unfair question, and I should ask another podcaster because, in all honesty, it's like a parent saying, asking a parent, well, which one's your favorite child when you love them all? And I've enjoyed every single guest that I've had on my show, and they've all had stories that have been so enlightening and inspiring, and trying to pick a favorite out of them. It's easier for me to say what points I liked from certain people than I liked this interview more than somebody else's.
Yeah.
But I need you to say which one you like the best. No, I'm just kidding.
Gosh, Darn it. Because
No,
I love them. I mean, obviously I love them all.
sure.
And like you said, for different reasons, because I mean, the top few that come to mind are for very different reasons. And so it's like, what do you love more? Ice cream or pizza? Well, I love them both. It depends on what mood I'm in.
Exactly.
That's a tough one. That's a tough one. Can I just,
We
can
can
I
take a
not
pat.
answer that one?
We cannot answer that one. That's fine. We can take a we can take a pass on
Yeah.
that because
I'm going to plead the fifth.
no, that's fine because on the other podcast that I was on, I did the same route. I was like, well, I can't really pick because it's not fair, honestly. Like I said, it's an unfair
Yeah.
question, and I knew that going into it, but I just wanted to see what you'd say. So,
Yeah.
congratulations, you passed.
Yeah. Well, you took yourself out of the running. So what was I supposed to say?
Well, yeah, well, that was just my own ego playing into it. Okay. All right. So, but you've had, you said you're into season 2. How many episodes are you in so far in total?
Well, none of it has aired yet. I have been
You
interviewing
mean
guests
just of
for,
season 2, correct?
yes.
Okay, so season
Yes.
1 has
So
aired.
season 2.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. There's 45 episodes of season 1.
Okay. I was there. I'm like, I'm pretty sure I listened to a couple of them. I want to make sure I hadn't listened to them.
Yes.
Yeah. So
The
okay.
wrong one. Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Season 1 is out and great. I like to say, but this year's host, which is still me, is much more experienced. Got some better quality, learned from, School of Hard Knocks. So it's going to be a lot better than last year, although I obviously loved and appreciate everyone who was a part of last year too. But we're stepping it up this season, so I'm really excited. Had great guests like yourself, obviously, so how can it go wrong?
There you go. Okay. So I want to ask you a non-podcast related question, then we'll come back to your podcast because this one just kind of popped in my head.
Sure.
So now for me, music has always played a very big role in everything that I do. I've always joked that my life has a soundtrack. Everything I do is music related.
I do too.
Yeah. I
I
always
can't believe
wanted to
you said
have
that.
like entrance music when I came into a room, and that like Darth Vader, he may be the bad guy, but he's got a theme song, you know.
Yes, he does. He
Um
does. Everyone knows he's coming in from the music.
exactly. So there's always certain things that you mentioned, going outside, and you mentioned some different things. Is there a specific website though that you would go to at times? Now, so for me, the reason I asked that is that I have a couple that I would go to, but I'm also very sports heavy, and so I would go check out like ESPN, and I would honestly, if I was feeling, and this might be like, this is the weirdest admission that I think I probably ever made online, is that I would go to ESPN and I would just scroll through and read random stories about what people were doing and how they were doing and what they were doing and why they were doing, because it was a distraction from everything else that may have been going on. Between that and video games, it's kind of what kept my sanity while my daughter was in the hospital. So was there ever a website, or if it's not a website, or was there a book that you went to when you would say, when music just wasn't going to be able to be used at that moment?
Very good question. Very good question. I would say there was a couple things, because when I was at my lowest of lows, my brain was not working well enough. I really could hardly read. And I don't mean I couldn't read, but my brain was not able to focus and make any sense of it. So I really didn't there for a while. So when I was in those modes, I too actually went to ESPN, but I didn't read. I would watch or YouTube and watch, inspirational stories about, of course, Tom Brady, because we all know that I'm almost obsessed with him. But his comeback story and how people really just counted him out, and he's really made something of himself. And I love the Cinderella stories. March Madness is coming up. I don't know when this is going to air, but there's always the Cinderella stories, the bracket busters. I would kind of focus on those because I needed that inspiration from people that I knew had already done it. So that was, I would say that's one of mine. I read a lot of self-help books and like energy healing books.
Okay.
I know that's not everyone's cup of tea, but Carol Tuttle, and I can't think of the book title right now, but it was written by Carol Tuttle, and it's about chakras. And it's really just about different ways to kind of balance our energy systems, and the kind of the symptoms that this system's off or this chakra is off, and how to help it. Actually, the color yellow was actually one of the things that I learned from it that I needed more of in my life. And so, ironically enough, maize and blue is Michigan colors. So when I started going into branding and things like that, here are my colors.
There you go.
But it wasn't just the Michigan thing. It was also, and my nails are yellow a lot of the time.
Yes, they are.
Just to kind of pick me up. It's just
Sure.
something little I can do.
Okay.
That I can do. And the other thing, I love listening to Tony Robbins.
Okay.
I'm a huge Tony Robbins fan. So I would watch him online. I would he has a thing on Netflix now. I just like how he's just very no nonsense.
Very straightforward.
Yeah, very straightforward. And I need that sometimes. I need the whap in the back of the head with love sometimes. So
I get that. I get that. I'm a very straightforward person, and I don't like guessing games. So it's easier for me if somebody has something to say, and whether I'm asking for the advice or the advice needs to be given. It's just easier for somebody to say, all right, this is what it is. And I think that guys like Tony Robbins are kind of like that. It's just, okay, here's what it is. And so I kind of, I can identify with that. All right. So let's go back to your podcast for a moment here, and let's talk about, we talked about that you're into season 2, and so the name Multiform PTSD, where did that come from, and why did you settle on that?
I was kind of doodling one day, and probably online, and where it comes from basically is PTSD has no uniform. It has many different looks. It can come many different ways. So multiform, because PTSD has no uniform. So because a lot of my show focuses on non-military PTSD, that being said, I just recorded one with a veterinarian or a vet that was in the military and serves in different ways. And so it's not completely non-military, but that's kind of my focus when I'm speaking, because that's what I can attest to. And so a lot of people, when they think of PTSD, is military and going to war. In fact, when they first told me I had PTSD, that was my first reaction. And I'm a flipping nurse. I was like, I was never at war. I'm in the military. How do I have PTSD? Like, I just didn't understand until I was in the middle of it. So just kind of to bring that awareness that it doesn't all happen from the same thing. Everyone's looks different. There's no uniform. And really, there shouldn't be a uniform way of healing either. I like to have a structured healing guide, but everyone's going to be a little bit different. So that's then why I wrote the book that I did, because I wanted the structure for everyone, but everyone's going to look different. And so it's multiform, not a uniform.
I like that. That's good. All right. So you keep mentioning this book, and I'm pretty sure I've missed it somewhere, but is there a way for people to see the book, or is that still in process?
It is still in process. Actually, later today, I'm talking to my cover artist, and he's going to do the internal layout for the book. So it's not out yet, but soon. Okay. I can't tell the date yet because we have to still talk, but it will be on my website. So, which is tracylowry.com. So when it's available, and I'll have things posted when it'll be launched, but it'll be on my website when it is.
All right. Excellent. We'll keep an eye for that. Okay. So Tracy, I have 2 questions that I ask every single guest. And so it is time for me to ask these of you. So looking back over the course of your life's history, what is the greatest lesson you have learned?
One?
Well, you can give more than one, but I usually just ask for one, but.
Right. No, I understand. I would have to say I'll give you 2. One of them is the importance of boundaries.
Okay.
I know that's kind of weird to have that beat, but I grew up, bless my mom's heart, love her to death. She's a very kind, loving woman. And I just want to say that first, but boundaries was not her forte. It is not her strength. And so it wasn't something I grew up learning very well. And it got me in trouble. It caused a lot of issues in my life, and I won't go into that,
Fair enough.
But I learned as I started learning more about boundaries and how to set them and keep them. And it actually, I always thought of them almost like walls, like build the walls. It keeps everyone out, keeps me in. And that just, I didn't want to ruin relationships like that. Well, actually, come to find out, it actually made the relationships that I had better, because I wasn't in my head building everything up and getting mad about things. And they were stepping over my boundaries like crazy, but they had no idea because I didn't say anything until all of a sudden, boom, they're way past the boundaries. I'm blowing up, fuming, and they're looking at me like, what is your problem? Because they had no idea. So, in making those well known and defined, it actually made those relationships better. And the more I practiced that, the more I was like, holy cow.
Yep.
Like, it didn't make my relationships worse. It made them better. So I would say that's one of them. And boundaries are never rude or disrespectful. I have to say that because some people say, I'm just doing my boundaries. And that they use that as an excuse to be maybe harsh and brutal.
Right.
That's not necessarily a boundary. So, there's more on that, but that's one of the lessons I learned. The other one was to listen to my inner soul. And, like I said, I'm a woman of faith. So, my spirit, have my God, what he's saying, what my intuition is telling me, I need to listen to that more than the critics. And that included the critic in my own head, because I was my worst critic, still am.
Probably always will be.
I needed to listen. Yeah, probably. But I needed to listen to those voices and not so much the critics, whether it be outside the head, inside the head, that I am way more capable than I have given myself credit for. And many other people in my life have given me credit for. I'm a whole lot more capable than, including myself, a lot of people realize. And so once I started listening to that and realizing that, things have really, really gotten better for me in my life, and things have just opened up. So I would say those were probably those are the two I'll pick.
Okay. I think those are good choices. I like them. All right. So our second question, which is closely akin to the first one. Looking back again over your life's course, what is the single greatest piece of advice you've been given?
Ooh, I'm kind of surprised this is what popped in my head, but I'm going to go with it.
Okay.
When I was younger, I was a figure skater. And so this piece of advice actually came from my father. Don't tell him. If you know my dad, don't tell him that I told you that this was my biggest piece of advice that I ever got. No, I'm just kidding.
Fair enough.
I had just had a really bad day, and I had fallen a lot. And so I was kind of like gingerly walking up the stairs, clearly was pretty sore and in a lot of pain. And I remember sitting down at the dinner table with ice packs literally wrapped around my hips to eat. And he was like, did you fall a lot today? And I just kind of looked at him like, yeah, obviously. And he went, good. Well, redheaded teenager Tracy was, what? Good? Well, how is this good? I mean, I didn't take it very well at first. But then he said this, and it has really resonated with me. He said, if you're falling, that means you're trying something new. You're trying something different. If you're not falling, you're not trying to grow. You're not trying to expand yourself at all. You're just staying where you're at. So you're working to get better. So I applaud that. Now, if I'm being honest, I did not find it wise in my teen years.
I would gather not. No.
If I'm being completely honest, but the older I got, the more I see myself actually using that piece of advice. Again, don't tell my dad. No, I'm kidding. But I use that a lot, and so that kind of gives me the strength to go out and try new things. I mean, to do a podcast,
right?
What? That was never in the cards for me, but I was like, you know what? Why not? So it just kind of has gotten me this far so far. And so who knows where else it'll get me, but it's worked good so far.
All right. Well, those are very good. I like both of those, actually. Very nice. All right. So Tracy, tell everyone where they can find out more about you and your podcast, please.
Yeah. Really, my website is really a good central hub, which again is tracylowry.com. You can get to everything from there. My social media, I have a YouTube page. I would like to plug to stay away from the Multiform PTSD platforms because I'm kind of going away from those. I'm putting all of that onto my Tracy Lowry branding stuff. So it's all in one place. So I would just look up
Smart.
my name. Yeah. Yeah. It makes it a whole lot easier.
Yeah.
And everything is still there. But just searching my name on social media. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, and I just started a Twitter, but I don't do anything on it yet. So
Understood. It takes a while
coming
on
soon.
the Twitter. Yeah, I gotcha. Okay, excellent. Well, guys, this is Tracy Lowry. You hear what she can talk about, how she talks about things. She's very down to earth, very open, honest, and frank in her thoughts and feelings about things. And that's one of the things I really enjoy, honestly, about Tracy, is her directness in the way she speaks. If you're interested in finding more about her, please check out tracylowry.com. That's TracyLowry.com, tracylowry.com. And you can find out everything about her show, Multiform PTSD. You're going to want to check that out. You're going to want to subscribe, give her a listen. Trust me, I am a subscriber. You're going to love it. So, but check it out. Really good person here for us all to kind of listen to, and the way that she deals with and talks with her guests. And as having been a guest on her show, I can tell you that it's a pretty comfortable experience. So, but Tracy, thank you for coming here today and taking a little time to talk with us here on Focused on Forward.
Thank you so much for having me. It was truly a pleasure.
Excellent. Excellent. All right, guys. Well, that's going to conclude us today. Thank you for listening to Focused on Forward. Well, that concludes another episode of Focused on Forward. To be a guest of Focused on Forward, you can reach us through Twitter at podcastfof, through our Facebook page named Focused on Forward, or through email focusedonforward@gmail.com. We look forward to hearing each and every one of your stories that has yet to be told. So until then, be safe, be kind, and be loving to one another as you stay focused on forward. Of life patterns that has affected you so profoundly that you have no choice but to find your new normal and become focused on moving forward. Each episode is designed to show the positivity that people bring to each and every one of their stories, the successes they've had, ways that they have become so definitively focused on moving forward. We look forward to sharing their stories, and we hope that they inspire you just as much as they have inspired us. Thanks for listening, and enjoy the show.